It sits exactly 90 miles off the coast of Key West, Florida. If you stand on the southernmost point of the United States and look out across the dark waters of the Florida Strait, you are looking at one of the most heavily patrolled bodies of water on the planet. For a modern fighter jet taking off from a Florida base, it is a casual 15-minute flight. But crossing that narrow strip of ocean is not just a change in geography. It is a violent collision with the past. Stepping onto this island is like walking straight through a portal into 1959. Right now, across the United States, we are arguing about artificial intelligence, the fragility of the electrical grid, and the future of self-driving cars. But just 90 miles away, an entire nation of 11 million people is experiencing catastrophic rolling blackouts that can last up to 18 hours a day. They are navigating cratered streets in 70-year-old Chevrolets, Fords, and Plymouths that are held together by salvaged parts, boat engines, and sheer human desperation. This is a place that defies every law of modern economics and basic survival. By all conventional logic, this country should have collapsed and crumbled into the Caribbean Sea decades ago. It has been completely severed from the global banking system. It operates under the longest and most comprehensive economic embargo in modern human history. You cannot use a standard American credit card here. You cannot wire money through normal international channels. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, the massive financial life support system was unplugged overnight. The world waited for the regime to starve and fall, but it did not. It mutated. It adapted. How does a nation completely isolated on America's doorstep survive for nearly 7 decades, while the rest of the planet moves rapidly into the future? How do you keep an entire country running when you cannot import standard engine parts, basic medical supplies, or heavy industrial machinery? The answer is far more complicated and far darker than a postcard picture of a vintage car parked next to a palm tree. And it is an answer that is becoming critically important right now. Because the calendar says 2026, but the geopolitical chessboard looks terrifyingly like October 1962. The ghosts of the Cold War are waking up, and they are returning to the exact same waters. Russian nuclear-powered submarines are once again sliding into the harbor of Havana. Warships flying the flag of the Russian Federation are docking just miles from the American coastline, conducting exercises in the Caribbean. At the exact same time, Chinese intelligence officers are quietly upgrading massive electronic eavesdropping facilities on the island, pointing their surveillance antennas directly at the United States Military Southern Command in Florida. They are not here for the tropical weather. They are not here to smoke the world-famous cigars. They are here because this island represents the ultimate strategic foothold in the Western Hemisphere. It is an unsinkable aircraft carrier anchored right in America's backyard. And right now, foreign adversaries are renting out that geography to put pressure directly on Washington. For decades, tourists from around the globe have traveled here to take photographs of colorful colonial streets and listen to street musicians playing guitars. But we are not going to do that today. We are not here to romanticize the poverty. We are not going to talk about the perfect mojito or the rhythm of the salsa or Ernest Hemingway's favorite bar. That is the illusion sold to people who do not want to see the rust, the decay, and the daily struggle underneath the paint. We are going to look at the cold, hard truth of survival in a hostile world. We are going to examine the brutal mechanics of a nation that has been forced to cannibalize itself just to see tomorrow. We are going to tear down the engine of this country. We will look under the hood to see exactly how this geopolitical Frankenstein is kept alive. We will explore the makeshift engineering, the underground economy, and the heavy human cost of a standoff that has outlasted 12 American presidents. From the crumbling Spanish colonial buildings, hiding underground bunkers, to the world-class doctors operating without sterile bandages. From the farmers trading crops for crude oil, to the massive black markets keeping the population fed. This is the story of a nation frozen in time, yet deeply entangled in the military conflicts of tomorrow. This is the stark reality of an island that simply refuses to die. Welcome to the machine. When you turn on this television and see a travel documentary about this island, the very first thing they always show you is a classic American car. You see a brightly colored 1957 Chevrolet Bel Air or a 1955 Ford Fairlane cruising slowly down a sun-drenched boulevard right next to the crashing waves of the ocean. To the American eye, especially to a man who spent his youth turning wrenches on a muscle car in a suburban garage, these vehicles look like a beautiful slice of nostalgia. In the United States, a car like that is a garage queen. It is pampered, it is polished, and it is taken out only on sunny Sunday afternoons for local car shows. But here on this island, that romanticized image is a complete and total lie. These vehicles, which the locals call Yank tanks, are not kept running out of a sense of pride or a love for vintage aesthetics. They are beasts of burden. They are kept alive out of pure, desperate necessity. When the trade embargo slammed shut in the early 1960s, the island was instantly cut off from the massive American automotive industry. The clock stopped. The people were frozen in time with the exact vehicles they had parked in their driveways on that very day. For nearly 7 decades, they have had to keep those exact same machines rolling down the battered roads. But if you walk up to one of these beautiful old cars and pop the heavy steel hood, the illusion shatters instantly. The original American 5.8 engine died sometime during the Lyndon B. Johnson administration. What you are looking at inside that engine bay is a mechanical Frankenstein. It is a jigsaw puzzle of mismatched machinery that would give an American safety inspector a heart attack. You might find a heavy 4-cylinder diesel engine ripped out of a decommissioned Hyundai fishing boat, heavily modified and welded to fit inside a Ford chassis. That boat engine is likely bolted to a manual transmission pulled from a 1980s Soviet-era Lada. The carburetor might be a patchwork of metal smuggled in small pieces from Panama or Mexico inside a duffel bag. And the modifications only get more bizarre the deeper you look. Because there are no auto parts stores on this island. You cannot order a replacement part online and have it delivered the next morning. If you look closely at the plumbing under the hood, the fuel lines and the brake lines are often not made of high-pressure automotive-grade steel. They are copper tubes ripped out of broken-down Soviet refrigerators and bent by hand to fit around a hot, vibrating engine block. The suspension springs carrying the tremendous weight of these massive steel cars are frequently reinforced with scrap rebar scavenged from collapsed colonial buildings. Even the bodywork is a testament to desperate improvisation. The bright blue or cherry red paint jobs that tourists love to photograph are rarely real automotive enamel. Real paint is a luxury most cannot afford or even find. Instead, the paint is often a toxic home brew. Mechanics will melt down plastic buckets and industrial resin, mixing it with whatever commercial pigment they can steal or scavenge from state-run factories. They apply it in open-air garages, fighting off the dust and the brutal tropical humidity. And beneath that thick layer of plastic paint, the chassis is in a constant state of war with the salty air of the Caribbean Sea. When the floorboards rust out and drop to the pavement, they do not buy new sheet metal. They cut up old steel oil drums, stolen traffic signs, or corrugated roofing metal and weld it directly to the rusted frame. When you ride in one of these cars, it does not sound like a classic American machine. It sounds like a diesel tractor laboring under extreme duress, shaking violently as it hits the cratered pavement. The true no-bullshit reality of Cuban engineering is found in the dirt of the backyards. The ingenuity of these mechanics is absolutely unparalleled because they operate in a world with zero spare parts. Let that sink in. Zero. In the United States, if an engine piston cracks or a rod gets thrown, you scrap the block or buy a replacement part. In Havana, a cracked piston is a death sentence for a family's income. So they do the impossible. Cuban mechanics will literally dig a hole in the dirt of their backyard. They build a mold out of tightly packed wet sand. They build a roaring fire using scrap wood and discarded motor oil. Then they gather broken aluminum pots, crushed soda cans, and pieces of destroyed engine blocks. They melt this scrap metal down into a glowing liquid and pour it directly into the sand mold. They cast a brand new raw engine piston completely from scratch by hand right there in the dirt. Once the crude metal cools, they take that rough chunk of aluminum to an ancient 70-year-old manual lathe. With steady hands and eyes that have seen decades of struggle, they machine that block of scrap metal down to the exact millimeter tolerance required to fit perfectly inside the cylinder of a patched-together engine block. They forge their own metal. They do not buy brake pads. They glue industrial friction material onto old steel backing plates. They rebuild dead alternators by hand, rewinding the microscopic copper coils thread by thread under a magnifying glass. If a fan belt snaps on the highway, they cut a piece of an old leather belt to keep the water pump turning just to get home. This is not a hobby for weekend enthusiasts. This is life or death economics. On this island, the car is the breadwinner. It is the only reliable way to move goods on the black market or earn hard currency driving foreigners around the capital. If the car dies, the family starves. The men whose grease-stained hands keep these rolling relics alive are arguably the greatest improvisational mechanics on the face of the earth. Their work is a profound testament to human survival. It is pure forced mechanical genius born out of absolute isolation and an unbreakable will to keep moving forward. If you want to understand the absolute breaking point of a modern society, you do not look at its military or its politicians. You look at its electrical grid. Right now, in the year 2026, this island is experiencing a catastrophic energy crisis that is almost impossible for an American to comprehend. Imagine your life if the power grid in your city just collapsed and never truly came back online. That is the daily reality here. The backbone of the national power supply is a crumbling industrial dinosaur called the Antonio Guterres Power Plant. It is a massive concrete and steel facility built decades ago, running on heavy crude oil and Soviet-era technology. And today, it is actively dying. The turbines are failing. The boilers are leaking. There are no replacement parts coming from Moscow or Beijing to save it. When this colossal plant goes offline, the entire country plunges into darkness. The government tries to manage the collapse by implementing rolling blackouts. The locals have a word for them: apagones. But these are not minor inconveniences where the lights flicker and come back on an hour later. In many provinces across the island, these apagones last for up to 18 hours a day. 18 hours with zero electricity. Imagine the brutal Caribbean heat in the middle of August. Temperatures sitting well over 90 degrees with 90% humidity. Now imagine surviving that heat without an air conditioner, without a fan, and most importantly, without a refrigerator. You cannot go to a wholesale store and buy food for the month. You cannot even buy meat for the week. Because within 24 hours without power, everything in your icebox will rot. Life is reduced to a primitive daily hunt. You wake up, you find food for that exact day, you consume it, and you start over again tomorrow. So how do 11 million people survive when the state stores are completely empty and the factories produce absolutely nothing? They survive through one of the most bizarre and resilient shadow economies on the planet. It is called the Mula economy. The mule economy. Because the government cannot provide basic goods, the citizens have taken the supply chain into their own hands. Every single day, ordinary Cubans board commercial flights headed to places like Panama City or Miami, Florida. They scrape together every dollar they can find to buy a plane ticket. But they are not going on vacation. They are the human freight trains keeping the island alive. When these mulas return to Havana, their flights are heavily overloaded. They step off the airplanes, dragging massive, oversized duffel bags wrapped tightly in layers of plastic shrink wrap. And inside those bags, you will not find luxury clothing or expensive electronics. You will find the raw materials of survival. They smuggle in thousands of bottles of aspirin and ibuprofen because the local pharmacies have empty shelves. They bring in heavy steel spark plugs, alternator belts, and brake pads to keep those 70-year-old cars running. They carry massive plastic jugs of powdered milk just so families can feed their infants. This is the reality of a collapsed supply chain. The entire nation relies on individuals hauling 80-pound bags of basic necessities through airport customs while bribing guards just to get the goods onto the streets. But to participate in this shadow economy, you need money. And this brings us to the ultimate paradox of the island. The official currency issued by the state is called the Cuban peso. To put it bluntly, the Cuban peso is effectively worthless. It is printed paper that holds absolutely no value on the global market and barely any value on the streets of Havana. Inflation has completely destroyed it. If you try to buy a single pound of pork or a carton of eggs with the official currency, you would need to carry a thick stack of bills in a backpack. The state-run grocery stores that accept this local money are essentially ghost towns. The shelves are completely bare, except for perhaps a few bottles of locally produced vinegar or rationing staples. The real economy. The one that actually keeps people alive runs entirely on the currency of the enemy. The street economy operates strictly on United States dollars and European euros. This is the crushing reality of 2026. A fiercely proud communist nation completely dependent on the physical cash of capitalist empires. But where do these dollars come from? They come from remittances. They come from the relatives and the exiles living in Hialeah, Florida, or Madrid, Spain, who wire money or send physical cash back home through underground networks. If you have a relative in America sending you crisp $100 bills, you can survive. You can take that green paper to the black market, and you can buy the powdered milk, the antibiotics, and the smuggled chicken. If you do not have someone in the United States sending you dollars, you are left to survive on a worthless peso in a country where the power is out 18 hours a day. It is a brutal, chaotic, and unforgiving financial system. The government pretends to pay the workers in pesos, and the workers pretend to work while spending all their energy hunting for dollars. It is an entire society running on fumes, sheer willpower, and the physical cash smuggled across the Florida Strait. If you are watching this, and you were born before 1960, you do not need a history book to tell you about the tension of the Cold War. You lived it. You remember the month of October in 1962. You remember being a kid in a brightly lit classroom and being told by your teacher to tuck your head and hide under a wooden desk to survive a thermonuclear blast. You remember the grainy black and white television broadcasts showing American naval destroyers enforcing a strict quarantine line in the ocean. Those 13 days of the Cuban Missile Crisis were the closest humanity has ever come to absolute total annihilation. The threat was not a theoretical concept debated by politicians. It was an arsenal of Soviet ballistic missiles armed with nuclear warheads and parked directly in the jungle just 90 miles from the Florida coast. They were dialed in and targeted straight at Miami, Washington, and New York. The world eventually exhaled, and the missiles were supposedly shipped back to Moscow. The American public moved on to other wars and other decades. But on this island, the Cold War never actually ended. The scars of that terrifying era are not locked away in a museum. They are poured in heavy concrete and hidden just beneath the dense green canopy of the tropical jungle. If you drive outside the crumbling city limits of Havana and push your way through the overgrown vines, you will stumble across the rotting physical remains of the Soviet war machine. There are massive subterranean bunkers dug deep into the solid limestone. These underground fortresses were engineered to withstand a direct American bombing run and to safely house highly volatile nuclear payloads. Today, these bunkers sit completely empty. They are flooded with stagnant rainwater and slowly being swallowed by the roots of the jungle. But the ballistic missiles were only the loud, visible part of the standoff. The real war was silent, and it was fought with electronics. During the absolute height of the Cold War, the Soviet Union constructed the Lourdes Signals Intelligence Station. It was a sprawling, heavily guarded military complex that served as the single largest Soviet listening post anywhere outside of the USSR. The facility was so massive that it required a staff of thousands of Russian military intelligence officers and technicians to keep it running 24 hours a day. From this single fortified location, the Russians cast a massive invisible net over the United States. They were highly capable of intercepting millions of private telephone conversations across the American South. They scooped up sensitive marine navigation data from the Atlantic Fleet. They even had the technological power to listen in on classified NASA space communications launching from Cape Canaveral. They heard absolutely everything. Walking through the decaying concrete shells of the Lourdes station today is a deeply haunting experience. You are standing inside the exact rooms where Soviet spies sat for decades, wearing heavy headphones, tracking the movements of American submarines and logging the secrets of the Pentagon. The massive radar dishes have been dismantled, but the heavy steel blast doors and the miles of severed copper wires remain bleeding dark orange rust into the damp Caribbean soil. But perhaps the most bizarre and stubborn relic of this ongoing conflict is located on the remote southeastern tip of the island. It is a piece of military geography that defies all modern logic. The United States Naval Base at Guantanamo Bay. Here, you have a massive, heavily fortified American military installation sitting directly on the sovereign soil of a communist country that officially despises the United States government. The base is surrounded by miles of razor-wire dense minefields and heavily armed watchtowers. It is often referred to as the cactus curtain. The paradox of Guantanamo is a geopolitical masterpiece of sheer stubbornness. Under a treaty signed all the way back in 1903, the United States leases this 45-square-mile patch of land. And every single year, the United States Treasury Department cuts a physical paper check for exactly $4,085 to pay the rent. They literally deliver this physical check to the Cuban government. But here is the truly bizarre reality of this frozen standoff. For over 60 years, the government in Havana has completely refused to cash those American checks. They sit stuffed inside a desk drawer somewhere in a dusty government building, accumulating decades of dust. Fidel Castro famously cashed exactly one rent check in 1959, claiming later that it was a simple accident. Since that day, the checks have piled up uncashed as a silent, angry protest against the American presence. Yet the American base remains heavily armed, fully funded, and fully operational. The United States military even built its own massive desalination power plant so that the base does not have to rely on a single drop of Cuban water. It is a daily humiliating reminder to the regime that they do not actually control their entire island. You have young American sailors drinking cold beer and watching football in air-conditioned barracks, just a few hundred yards away from Cuban border guards who are surviving on strict rations and standing at attention in the sweltering, humid heat. It is a high-stakes staring contest that has lasted for multiple generations. It is a microscopic war zone, frozen in the 1960s, and neither side is willing to blink. If you listen to the official government broadcasts or read the glossy travel brochures, they will tell you that this island is a medical utopia. They will proudly declare that they have one of the highest doctor-to-patient ratios anywhere on Earth. They will boast that healthcare is completely free for every single citizen from the cradle to the grave. And on paper, they are not entirely wrong. This is a small, impoverished nation that managed to achieve something truly remarkable during the global pandemic. While wealthy nations were fighting over supply chains, this island locked down its laboratories and invented its very own COVID-19 vaccines, including one named Abdullah. They produced it, they tested it, and they injected it into their own population. To the outside world, it looks like an absolute miracle of socialist engineering. But like everything else on this island, the reality heavily depends on where you are allowed to look. If you step away from the heavily guarded tourist clinics and walk into a normal local hospital in Havana, the illusion shatters immediately. You will meet some of the most brilliant and highly trained medical professionals you will ever encounter in your life. These are doctors who can diagnose complex diseases with just a stethoscope and their bare hands because they have to. But if you look around the emergency room, the conditions are absolutely staggering. The walls are peeling. The air conditioning has been broken for a decade. The smell of bleach is completely absent because they do not have any. These world-class doctors are fighting a daily war with absolutely no ammunition. They have the knowledge to perform complex surgeries, but they frequently do not have basic antibiotics to prevent post-operative infections. They do not have fresh, sterilized syringes. They do not have clean scalpel blades. In many local clinics, they do not even have latex surgical gloves. A highly trained surgeon might be forced to wash a single pair of disposable rubber gloves with a bar of rationed soap and hang them out to dry so they can be reused on the next patient. For the ordinary citizen, getting sick is a terrifying logistical nightmare. If your mother or your brother needs to be admitted to a hospital, you cannot just drop them off and trust the system. The hospital provides the building and the doctor, but the family has to provide almost everything else. You have to bring your own bandages. You have to bring your own rubbing alcohol smuggled in from Miami. If the patient needs to stay overnight, the family must bring their own pillows and their own bed sheets. In some extreme cases, families have even been told to bring their own light bulbs from home, just so the doctors can see what they are doing in the operating room. So how does a country with so many brilliant doctors end up with zero basic medical supplies? To understand this, you have to understand the modern economy of the island. For generations, this country survived by cutting and exporting sugar. Millions of tons of it were loaded onto cargo ships and sent to the Soviet Union. But the sugar industry has completely collapsed. The mills are rusting in the sun, and the fields are dead. The government realized they had nothing left to sell to the world. They had no natural resources and no manufacturing base, but they did have an endless supply of highly educated doctors. Today, this island does not export sugar. It exports humans. It is a massive state-run enterprise known as medical diplomacy. The government takes thousands of its best doctors and nurses and ships them overseas. They send medical brigades deep into the dangerous jungles of Venezuela. They send them to remote villages in Africa and even to hospitals in Italy. But these doctors are not going as independent contractors. They are sent as property of the state. The economics of this human export are brutal and highly lucrative. When a Cuban doctor is sent to work in Venezuela, the Venezuelan government does not pay the doctor directly. They pay the Cuban government, and they usually do not pay in cash. They pay in crude oil. Massive oil tankers leave Caracas and sail to Havana as direct payment for the medical labor. When doctors are sent to European or African nations, those governments pay the Cuban state in hard currency. This medical export business generates billions of dollars a year. It has become the single largest source of foreign income for the entire country, easily surpassing tourism. The doctors themselves see very little of this massive wealth. The state keeps the vast majority of the money, often pocketing up to 90% of the salary paid by the host country. The doctor receives a small stipend and the promise that their family back home will be taken care of. If a doctor decides to defect or abandon the mission while overseas, the government retaliates by banning them from returning to the island to see their children or their parents for 8 long years. This is the grim reality of the medical miracle. It is a system built on the backs of incredibly dedicated and trapped professionals. They are brilliant minds forced to work with no bandages, no medicine, and no freedom. They are human currency traded on the global market for barrels of heavy crude oil just to keep the lights on back home. It is a multi-billion-dollar survival mechanism that relies entirely on sacrificing the very people who are trained to save lives. If you ask the average American man what comes to mind when he hears the word Cuba, he will likely give you 2 answers: Fidel Castro and premium cigars. For over a century, the island has held an undisputed reputation for rolling the finest tobacco on the face of the earth. Names like Cohiba and Monte Cristo carry a mythical weight in the smoking rooms of the world. And the absolute heart of this empire is a lush western province called Pinar del Rio. The soil here in the Vuelta Bajo region is legendary. It is said to contain the perfect biological balance of minerals to grow tobacco leaves that burn with a specific white ash and a rich, heavy, peppery smoke. But the romantic image of the wealthy gentleman smoking a perfect Cuban cigar in a leather chair is hiding a massive agricultural disaster. If you travel to the tobacco fields of Pinar del Rio today, in the year 2026, you will not find a booming agricultural paradise. You will find a region that is fighting for its very life. The reality is that the famous tobacco industry has been crippled by a combination of brutal nature and relentless economic failure. In the fall of 2022, Hurricane Ian slammed directly into the western coast of the island. It was a Category 3 monster that completely leveled the massive wooden drying barns known as Casas de Tabaco. It ripped the protective canvas tents right off the shade-grown plants and flooded the delicate soil with salt water. Years later, the damage is still deeply visible across the landscape. The local farmers simply do not have the lumber to rebuild the massive curing barns. They do not have the diesel fuel to run the tractors to properly clear the ruined fields. But the problem goes much deeper than one severe tropical storm. The very earth itself is exhausted. Because the country is completely broke, they cannot import high-quality synthetic fertilizers. They cannot bring in modern agricultural chemicals to fight off the blue mold that ruthlessly destroys the crops. The farmers are forced to rely on deeply outdated farming methods, often using ox-drawn plows in heavily depleted soil. Furthermore, the government forces these skilled tobacco farmers to sell the vast majority of their harvest directly to the state at strictly fixed, worthless prices. So the legendary cigars that sell for $100 apiece in London or Paris are being grown by men who can barely afford to put a decent meal on their own dinner tables. The absolute crown jewel of Cuban agriculture is slowly turning to dust under the weight of sheer incompetence. But the most shocking truth about agriculture on this island has absolutely nothing to do with tobacco. It has to do with basic survival and a massive geopolitical loophole. If you watch the news, you hear politicians endlessly debate the American trade embargo. The narrative is always exactly the same. The United States blockades the island entirely, preventing them from getting the essential goods they need to survive. But if you walk into a private market in Havana and look at the frozen food section, you are going to see something that completely breaks the strict rules of the Cold War. You will see heavy plastic bags filled with frozen chicken leg quarters. And if you read the label printed on those bags, you will see that they were not processed in Russia or China or Venezuela. They were processed and packaged inside the United States of America. This is the ultimate paradox of the embargo that nobody talks about. Despite over 6 decades of intense political hostility, the United States is actually one of the absolute largest suppliers of food to the island. Back in the year 2000, the American government passed a very specific humanitarian loophole in the sanctions. It legally allowed American agricultural companies to sell food directly to the communist government. But there was a major non-negotiable catch. The regime is not allowed to buy on credit. They cannot use the global banking system to finance these massive deals. Every single shipment of food must be paid for in physical hard cash up front before the cargo ships ever leave the American port. And the Cuban government has absolutely no choice but to pay up. Their own agricultural system has collapsed so completely that they cannot even feed their own population. They do not grow enough rice, they do not grow enough beans, and they certainly do not raise nearly enough livestock. So they take the hard currency they scrape together from the overseas medical exports and the European tourists, and they send it directly back to the American heartland. Right now, poultry farmers in states like Arkansas and Georgia are making hundreds of millions of dollars every single year selling chicken directly to their sworn enemy. Massive cargo ships load up thousands of tons of frozen American poultry in ports along the Gulf of Mexico and sail straight across the Florida Strait into Havana Harbor. It is a brilliant and brutal piece of capitalist reality. The politicians in Washington and Havana can shout at each other on television all they want. But at the end of this day, the communist state relies heavily on the American farmer just to keep its people from starving. The island might be stuck in the 1950s, but the massive cargo ships delivering Arkansas chicken run on pure modern American capitalism. Most Americans believe the Cold War ended in the early 1990s. We watched the Berlin Wall get torn down with sledgehammers on the evening news. We saw the Soviet flag lowered from the Kremlin, and we thought the great global chess match was finally over. We assumed the threat of foreign military powers sitting right off the American coast was a closed chapter in our history books. But down here in the warm, dark waters of the Caribbean, the Cold War never actually ended. It simply went dormant. It waited for the right conditions to return. And now in the year 2026, it has returned with an absolute vengeance. The players are exactly the same, but the new sponsors have extremely deep pockets and terrifying new technology. The Russian bear and the Chinese dragon have officially returned to the island, and they are setting up camp right on the front porch of the United States. If you want hard physical evidence, you do not have to look very far. Just look at the recent satellite imagery of Havana Harbor. For decades, this deep water port was filled with nothing but rusted fishing trawlers and small commercial freighters hauling powdered milk. But recently, the massive gray steel of the Russian Navy has returned to these waters. We are not talking about simple diplomatic visits or small patrol boats. We are talking about heavily armed guided missile frigates and highly advanced nuclear-powered submarines slipping quietly into the bay. These are some of the most lethal pieces of military engineering on the planet. They are the Yasin-class submarines, heavily shielded, completely silent, and fully capable of carrying hypersonic cruise missiles. When a Russian nuclear submarine docks in Havana, it is sitting closer to the beaches of Florida than most Americans are to their own state capitals. You could drive a golf cart from Key West to the Russian fleet if there was a bridge. It is a massive, heavy display of brute force designed specifically to make Washington sweat. But while the Russians are making a loud, very public show of force with their warships, the Chinese government is playing a much quieter and far more dangerous game. They are not sending nuclear submarines to the Caribbean, where they can be photographed by tourists. They are sending highly trained electronic engineers and military contractors. Intelligence agencies have confirmed that Beijing is actively upgrading and expanding massive electronic eavesdropping facilities right on the island. They are pouring billions of dollars into highly classified radar arrays, signals intelligence bases, and deep underground fiber optic networks. These massive antennas are not pointing out toward the open ocean to track weather patterns. They are pointed directly north. They are aimed straight at the heart of the Florida Peninsula. You have to understand why Florida is the target. Florida is the absolute nerve center of the United States military presence in the hemisphere. It is home to the United States Southern Command and the United States Central Command. The Chinese military is sitting just 90 miles away, silently vacuuming up highly classified radio transmissions, satellite uplinks, and cellular data from American military bases. They are listening to the exact movements of the American Atlantic Fleet. They are tracking the deployment times of advanced fighter jets launching from MacDill Air Force Base. They can monitor the phone calls of military personnel. It is a massive invisible intelligence dragnet, operating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, completely unchallenged. You have to ask yourself, why two major global superpowers are suddenly pouring so much money and military hardware into an impoverished island with a completely collapsed economy. I can assure you, they are not doing it out of the kindness of their hearts, and they are not doing it for the rum. They are doing it because of the fundamental rules of geopolitical leverage. Right now, the United States is heavily involved in arming and funding military conflicts right on the borders of foreign adversaries. The United States is actively supporting Ukraine, which is effectively the front yard of Russia. The United States is heavily arming Taiwan, which sits directly off the coast of mainland China. The leadership in Moscow and Beijing decided that if Washington is going to put weapons and intelligence officers in their backyards, they are going to do the exact same thing to the United States. It is a ruthless game of geopolitical chicken. And where exactly does the Cuban government fit into this massive power struggle? For the regime in Havana, this is no longer about spreading the glorious communist revolution across Latin America. It has absolutely nothing to do with Karl Marx or ideology anymore. It is about pure, desperate survival. The island is completely bankrupt. They have no fuel to run their crumbling power plants, and they have absolutely no money to buy food to prevent their citizens from rioting in the streets. So they are doing the only thing they have left to do. They are renting out their geography. They are leasing their highly strategic location to the highest bidder on the world stage. In exchange for allowing Russian warships to dock and Chinese spies to build radar towers, the regime receives shipments of heavy crude oil and massive debt forgiveness. They have effectively turned their entire sovereign nation into a forward operating base for foreign powers. It is a brutal and cynical calculation. The Cuban government is more than willing to put itself directly in the crosshairs of the American military just to keep the lights on in Havana for a few more months. The chessboard has been completely reset. The pieces are locked in place, and the waters of the Florida Strait are once again the most dangerous flashpoint on the global map. Let us say you are sitting in your living room watching this, and you decide you want to see this island for yourself before the whole place completely collapses. If you are an American man over the age of 65, you need to understand exactly what you are signing up for. You need to immediately erase any image of a relaxed Caribbean vacation from your mind. This is not the Bahamas. This is not a luxury cruise where you sip drinks by a pristine swimming pool and complain about the room service. Traveling to this island is a rugged, physically demanding expedition. It requires a tremendous amount of patience, grit, and a willingness to step far outside your comfort zone. You are stepping into a heavily fortified communist state that is actively experiencing a severe economic collapse. It is a brilliant and fascinating place, but it will fight you every single step of the way. The first hurdle you will face is your own government. Under United States federal law, you cannot simply buy a plane ticket and fly to Havana for a beach vacation. Pure tourism is strictly illegal for American citizens. If you want to go, you have to fit into a very specific legal category. Most Americans travel under a license called Support for the Cuban People. This is not just a meaningless stamp on a piece of paper. It means you are legally forbidden from spending your money at any business owned by the Cuban military. And since the military owns virtually every single major hotel resort and tour bus company on the island, your options are severely limited. You will be staying in private homes rented out by local citizens. You will be eating in small private dining rooms set up inside family living rooms. You are forced to navigate the grassroots economy, which is exactly where you will see the absolute unvarnished truth of how the people actually survive. But the most shocking reality of traveling here is the financial system. If you take a trip to Europe or Asia, you bring a plastic card and you swipe it for everything you need. If you bring a credit card issued by a United States bank to this island, it is absolutely nothing more than a useless piece of plastic. It will not work at an automated teller machine. It will not work at a restaurant. You are completely locked out of the electronic banking system. Cash is absolute king. You must calculate exactly how much money you will need for your entire trip, and then you need to bring all of it in physical paper cash hidden securely on your person. And it cannot just be any cash. You need to go to your local bank in the United States and demand perfectly crisp, untorn, unblemished $100 bills. If a bill has a tiny tear in the corner or a pen mark across the face, the local money exchangers will completely refuse to take it. Once you arrive, you will have to exchange those crisp American bills on the street just to buy a bottle of water or pay for a taxi ride. You will walk around with huge stacks of worthless local currency in one pocket and highly valuable American dollars hidden in another. You become your own walking bank vault in a country desperate for hard currency. The next thing you need to prepare for is the technological blackout. We live in an era where we are constantly connected to our smartphones. We expect to land in a foreign country, connect to a cellular network, and immediately check our emails or read the news. On this island, the internet is not a basic human right. It is a highly restricted, heavily monitored tool, controlled completely by the state telecommunications monopoly. You can buy a temporary tourist cellular card, but the connection is agonizingly slow and incredibly expensive. You will find yourself standing in public parks just to catch a faint signal. And you must understand that the government is watching the traffic. If you try to access certain foreign news websites or political platforms, you will find they are completely blocked. You will need a virtual private network installed on your phone before you even leave American soil. But even then, you are at the absolute mercy of the regime. When the citizens get angry and take to the streets to protest the lack of food and electricity, the government does not hesitate. They reach up and physically unplug the entire internet for the whole country. Millions of people are plunged into total digital darkness instantly. You will have no way to contact your family back in the States. You will have no way to check your flight status. You will be completely cut off from the outside world. This is why a trip to this island is not a vacation. It is a brutal reality check. It is a journey that will test your patience every single hour of the day. You will deal with scheduled blackouts where you sit sweating in the dark. You will deal with severe food shortages where a restaurant menu is just a list of things they do not actually have. You will ride in 70-year-old cars that smell like raw diesel fuel and have no seat belts. But if you have the stomach for it and the mindset of a true explorer, it is one of the most profoundly fascinating places on the face of the earth. You will see a level of human resilience and mechanical ingenuity that simply does not exist anywhere else. You will sit on a crumbling seawall, and you will realize you are looking at a society that has survived the absolute impossible. It is a raw, unfiltered look at the brutal realities of history still playing out right in our own backyard. Let us go back to the very beginning of this journey. We started by looking across the dark water of the Florida Strait and asking one massive, impossible question. How does a nation completely cut off from the global banking system, sitting just 90 miles off the coast of Florida, survive for nearly 7 decades? How does an island freeze its clocks in the year 1959 and not completely collapse into total anarchy? Over the past 60 years, the United States government has tried absolutely everything to break this regime. They tried a massive military invasion at the Bay of Pigs. They tried countless assassination operations. They implemented the most brutal and comprehensive economic embargo in the history of the modern world. When the Soviet Union collapsed in the early 1990s, the financial life support was unplugged, and the world held its breath waiting for the government in Havana to finally shatter. But the collapse never came. When the Venezuelan economy imploded and the cheap oil stopped flowing, the world waited again. When a global pandemic shut down every single tourist flight and emptied the hotels, the experts predicted the final days of the revolution. Yet the streets did not overthrow the leadership, and the government did not fracture. The answer to this incredible mystery is a brutal and uncomfortable truth. This island did not survive despite being frozen in time. It survived precisely because it was frozen in time. The regime in Havana did not spend the last 70 years building a functioning modern economy. They spent it building an absolute fortress of total state control. They systematically dismantled every single independent institution. They took control of the food supply, the power grid, the medical system, and the flow of information. By keeping the entire population completely focused on the desperate daily hunt for a single pound of chicken or a bottle of aspirin, they ensured that the people had absolutely no energy left to organize a political resistance. They weaponized poverty. They turned sheer survival into a full-time job. But a fortress still requires funding. And to pay for this massive open-air system of control, the Cuban government became the ultimate geopolitical mercenaries. They realized very early on that their greatest natural resource was not sugar, and it was not tobacco. Their greatest natural resource was their geography. They sit directly under the soft underbelly of the American Empire. And so they leased out their sovereignty to any foreign power that wanted to threaten Washington. For 30 years, they allowed themselves to be a forward operating base for the Soviet military, taking billions of dollars in direct subsidies in exchange for hosting nuclear missiles and listening stations. When the Russian money dried up, they pivoted instantly. They shipped thousands of their own doctors and teachers into the dangerous jungles of South America, trading human labor for millions of barrels of heavy Venezuelan crude oil. And today, in 2026, as the power grid fails and the oil ships stop coming, they have simply found a new sponsor. They are heavily leveraging their island in exchange for massive amounts of Chinese debt and a renewed Russian naval presence. They have successfully survived for 70 years by making absolutely sure that America's greatest enemies always have a deeply vested financial and military interest in keeping the island afloat. When you finally understand this, you realize that Cuba is not a romantic museum of classic cars. It is not a tropical time capsule preserved for the amusement of European tourists. It is a highly strategic, fully operational, unsinkable aircraft carrier permanently anchored just 90 miles from the United States. It is a profound and terrifying testament to the fact that complete economic isolation does not actually destroy a determined nation. It simply forces it to adapt. It forces it to mutate into a completely different kind of machine. As long as global superpowers like Russia and China feel the need to maintain a physical military and intelligence foothold right in America's backyard, this island will never be allowed to sink. The foreign money will continue to trickle in just enough to keep the military loyal and the power grid barely functioning. The island will continue to keep its 1950s engines running through sheer force of will. It will be held together by scavenged copper wire, heavily rusted steel, and pure unadulterated political defiance. So the next time you are flipping through the channels and you see a travel show flashing a photograph of a shiny cherry red 1957 Chevrolet parked on the bright colonial streets of Havana, do not look at the polished paint job. Do not look at the smiling tourist in the passenger seat. Look closely at the exhaust pipe. Look at the thick black smoke pouring out of the back. Look at the heavily scarred, mismatched machinery underneath that is fighting desperately just to survive for one more day. See you on the next journey.